You spend your life telling a story about who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. You wake up every morning and pick up the same narrative. I am so-and-so. I live here. I believe this. I want that. It feels real. It feels solid. But what if this I, this self you defend, polish, and protect, is nothing more than an illusion? You see, life has a wonderful trick. It creates patterns that believe they are separate from the whole. The wave thinks it is something apart from the ocean. The flame imagines it burns alone. And you, my friend, imagine yourself as an isolated mind, floating inside a fragile body, looking out at a world that happens to exist out there. But let's pause. Really pause. Where exactly is this you that you think you are? Can you point to it? Is it in your thoughts? Your memories? Your face in the mirror? Everything you call me keeps changing. Thoughts arise and vanish. Memories fade. The body renews every cell. And yet, there's this subtle sense of continuity, as if behind the shifting scenery, there's a permanent observer. That we call the ego. The ego is the idea of yourself that life invented to play the game of being human. It's a convenient illusion, like a username on the cosmic internet. It helps you interact, organize, and survive. But somewhere along the line, we forgot that the username wasn't the user. We began to mistake the mask for the face. Alan Watts once said, "Ego is a social institution with no physical reality. The self is a convention, not a constant." And Lao Tzu whispered centuries before, "The sage has no fixed mind. He takes the mind of the people as his own." What both were pointing to is that our sense of self is not a fixed object. It's a verb. It's a process, a flow, a performance that never stops moving. You are not a thing that is. You are something that happens. The birth of the ego. When you were a child, there was no you. There was only awareness, raw, open, curious. You didn't separate yourself from what you saw. The tree wasn't a tree. It was simply part of everything. The sound of the rain wasn't outside you. It was you. Then one day, someone pointed and said your name. Alice, Allie, John, Mary. And the mind began building a border, an invisible fence around experience. The infinite became personalized. The story began, language gave birth to separation. The moment we learned to say I, we learned to cut reality into pieces. From then on, we lived as characters in a script written by culture, memory, and conditioning. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. It's necessary. We need identities to function. But the tragedy begins when we forget we're wearing the mask. We start confusing the actor with the role. You see, the ego is not evil. It's just insecure. It's terrified of disappearing. So it spends its life defending its borders, polishing its image, and keeping its story alive. It says, I must be successful. I must be right. I must be seen. But the more you chase the solid sense of self, the more it slips through your fingers. The prison of identity. The ego's greatest trick is convincing you that you are separate, that you must protect this little bubble called me. It's like a wave on the ocean, trying to maintain its shape forever, terrified of merging back into the sea. And yet, that merging is inevitable, because the wave is the sea. Every time you say, I am this, you also say, I am not that. And so the boundaries tighten. You define yourself by contrast, by difference. Your mind builds a wall to keep you inside and life outside. This is the source of almost all human suffering. Because the moment you believe you are separate, the world becomes something to fight, fix, or fear. We suffer not because life is cruel, but because the ego resists the truth that it's not in charge. You've probably noticed, the more tightly you cling to your identity, the more fragile it becomes. The ego is a glass house built in a storm. It demands certainty in an uncertain world. It says, I am my job, my beliefs, my reputation, my followers. And when life inevitably changes, when loss comes knocking, the ego cracks. But that breaking isn't the end of you. It's the beginning of truth. Now, let's look at this not just philosophically, but scientifically. Neuroscience has been searching for the self for decades, scanning the brain, mapping consciousness. And yet, no single location has ever been found that holds an I. There's no tiny controller sitting behind your eyes, no captain steering the ship. Instead, the brain is a symphony. Billions of neurons playing together, producing the illusion of a central conductor. Cognitive scientists call this the narrative self. It's a mental construction, a story the brain tells to make sense of its own complexity. In other words, the you think you are is a work of fiction, a brilliant, necessary, and constantly edited illusion. Buddhism realized this long before neuroscience caught up. In the teaching of Anatta, the no-self doctrine, the Buddha revealed that clinging to a permanent self is the root of all suffering. When you stop insisting that I exist as a separate, solid thing, suffering begins to dissolve. And what remains when the illusion fades? Pure awareness. The witness that sees without judging, without naming, without needing to control. The freedom of losing yourself. Think of the moments when you felt most alive. Listening to music, dancing, falling in love, gazing at the sky. In those moments, the ego vanishes. Time dissolves. There's no me analyzing or comparing. There's only being, and that's when life flows effortlessly. Alan Watts said, "To define yourself is to limit yourself. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. To lose yourself is not to vanish. It's to return to what you truly are. Because behind every identity, man, woman, thinker, creator, lies something unnameable, boundless, and eternal. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you start to be yourself. When you stop defending your story, life writes a new one through you. That is the paradox. When you surrender the illusion of control, when you stop clinging to the illusion of self, you finally experience true freedom. Once the boundaries of the ego dissolve, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see yourself in everything. In the tree bending in the wind, in the stranger's eyes, in the silence between sounds. You realize that the universe is not happening to you. It's happening as you. Lao Tzu described it as the Tao, the way, the eternal flow that gives rise to all things, and then swallows them back again. To the mind, this sounds frightening, losing individuality. But to the heart, it's pure peace. Because when there's no me and you, there's no conflict. There's only one vast movement of life, endlessly transforming. The river doesn't mourn its waves. It celebrates their dance. In that recognition, compassion is born. Because you see, to hurt another is to hurt yourself. To love another is to love the universe in another form. This is what the mystics meant by enlightenment. Not some glowing halo, but a shift in perception. The realization that what you truly are has no name, no border, no fear. The ego will still whisper, of course. It will say, "But who am I without my story?" And the answer is beautifully simple. You are the story being told. You are the silence between thoughts, the space through which experience passes, the consciousness that dreamed itself into form to taste the sweetness of its own creation. Alan Watts once laughed and said, "You are something the universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something the ocean is doing. You don't need to find yourself. Because you were never lost. You only believed the story that said you were. The wise man doesn't kill the ego. He sees through it. He wears it lightly, as one wears a costume in a play, knowing the real self was never on the stage at all. So ask yourself, who are you when the story stops? Who are you before the mind says, I? Sit with that question, and the walls of the ego begin to fade like mist in morning sunlight. Because in truth, you are not this moment's thought, or this lifetime's name. You are the awareness in which every moment, every name, every world arises and dissolves. When you realize this, something magnificent unfolds. A quiet, boundless peace. The anxiety of being someone melts into the joy of simply being. And perhaps that is what life has been trying to show you all along. That the self you've been protecting is a wave in the ocean, a note in the song, a spark in the fire. Beautiful, temporary, and eternal all at once. So the next time you feel lost, remember, you are not a character in the universe. You are the universe, briefly remembering itself as you. When the ego falls silent, the truth begins to sing. And that, my friend, is the sound of freedom. Because when the story ends, the music of being begins. But if there is no separate self to cling to, how do we find peace in a world that constantly changes? That is the next realization, the wisdom of insecurity, finding peace in a changing world.